Welcome to Honest Money, your best guide to financial freedom. I'm Warren Ingram, the author of a few best-selling books, and I'm also an award-winning financial planner, and I've helped thousands of people on their journey to financial freedom. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to share my experience and the best ideas that I've learned, and I hope these ideas help you on your journey to financial freedom. Welcome to Honest Money. Today, I trust you enjoy this episode because it's all about trusts. And we're going to get into the meat of this now, and I hope to make not too many more corny puns, but I need to introduce our expert guest today because trusts is quite a tricky field. So I thought, I need to get some expert backup here, and welcome to George Robertson from Galileo Advisory Services. Thanks, George, for joining us.
How's it, Warren? It's great to be part of the show. Thanks for inviting me.
So trusts are a topic that come up regularly from our listeners, and especially parents with young children. And I'm always scared to get into this topic, not because it's not an important topic. It's a very important topic, but because it's full of jargon, it's full of legalese, and the show is meant to be educational and somewhat entertaining. And I'm scared that we put people to sleep. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that between me and George, we talk about this in plain language, and any legalese will kind of explain it as much as we possibly can. So just to give a little bit of background, what is a trust? Why do they exist? Trusts actually go back more than 1,000 years. The oldest trust has been around literally when the Europeans were invading Jerusalem back in the days of the Crusades. And how did they come about? Why were they there? It was because you'd have a landowner who would say, he's got a farm somewhere in Europe or in the UK, and he's going off to go and fight in Jerusalem. And, that's battles that last 6, 8, 10, 30 years sometimes. And someone needs to look after the farm. Someone needs to look after the children who are left behind, and stand for that person. Someone needs to actually, be the representative for the person who's no longer there. And the idea was that, if the children reached, maturity and they became adults, they could take over responsibility for the farm and themselves again. But in the meantime, someone needed to be responsible. And so this concept of trusts was formed, where the assets were then left to someone literally called the trustee, someone that let's just say the landowner really trusted, that had good knowledge about what was going on, and also was in a position to actually look after the assets ethically and morally. And then they would look after the family as well, until such time as the family could look after themselves, or hopefully that the landowner actually came back from war. But as we know, war kind of carries the risk that you never come back. So trusts are a very old legal vehicle. They've been around in South Africa for a very long time as well. I don't know exactly when, but very, very long time. And so they have a very good and important role to play in financial planning. However, I think the critical thing, and George, you are always welcome to disagree. This is honest money, so we can be honest. But the one thing I'd say is they are not designed to be tax planning vehicles. If you're looking at a trust as a way to avoid tax or to kind of dodge your taxes, that is something that there were loopholes in the past, but I feel those loopholes were closed a long, long time ago. And so in South Africa, the primary purpose of a trust is to make sure that if you've got assets that need to go from you as the owner of them to the next generation, then a trust might be a very good idea. For example, if you are a parent with young children, it's really a bad idea to leave your 5 million rands worth of assets to your 13-year-old son and hope that he's going to make clever decisions with the money as a 13-year-old. And so it's important then to say, well, I need the money to go from my name, my estate, into my trust. And then the trustees are there to make sure that my child is looked after until my child is old enough to look after himself. And so if that's the primary purpose of a trust, I think that is why a trust should exist. If you want to use it to dodge tax, you're wasting time. And in fact, often trusts are really tax prejudicial. The SARS loves to tax trusts much more than they do companies and individuals. Have I got that about right, George?
100%, Warren, 100%. Yeah, look, there's a lot of changes in the trust law that happened the last couple of years. The listeners might have picked up the Section 7C in the press. It becomes technical. But if you loan money to a trust, then there's a deemed interest component on which you pay donation tax. So you've got to be careful just to establish a trust, to put cash in there and to start your investment. You've got to look at the tax implications around that, because it becomes expensive for sure.
So let's just talk about how one starts a trust. So in the beginning, you're gonna write a document. I can't recommend strongly enough that you make sure you've got an expert helping you draw up that document. This is not something you can do on the back of a cigarette box and hope that it's going to work out. So the starting point is draw up a document that establishes the trust. The legalese for that is a trust deed. Am I right, George?
100%, Warren. Yeah, so there's two ways of establishing a trust. It's called the living trust, the inter vivos trust. So that's a legal document that you would prepare now, and where you would there would be a founder and trustees, and they'll sign an agreement, and the trustees would be appointed, with a duty to administer the assets in this trust on behalf of beneficiaries. So typically, the trustees would be the people that you trust, and the beneficiaries would be, you and your spouse and your children. And then the trustees would be appointed to manage the funds on behalf of that beneficiaries. And then you go through a process to register this document at the Master of the High Court. And you get a letter of authority, and then the trust is established. And then you can buy investments within the trust. So that's the one way of establishing a trust. Another way is called the testamentary trust, whereby you build in the trust as a condition or as a section within your will. Then it's only established when you die, and then in your will, you would specify in that section, who the trustees would be, who the beneficiaries would be, and what the rules would be in terms of how the trustees must manage that funds on behalf of the beneficiaries or the children.
Okay, so let's go back to the living the living trust. It's the inter vivos trust, right? I've got to get this right in my head. So if I wanted to put money into a living trust, there's really going to be, in my head, two ways that happens. One is I can lend money to a trust and say, here's R1 million. You according to the taxman, the trust is going to have to pay me interest. Otherwise, there's all sorts of complications around that. So I'm going to have to lend the money to the trust. The trust is going to pay me interest. I'm going to pay income tax on the interest. But now the trust has got an asset of its own. It can start investing the money, and over time, somewhere along the line, it's going to have to pay me back that loan one day. So to me, that's the one option. The other option is I can donate money to a trust. And, as a South African individual, I'm allowed to put in 100,000 rands worth of donations to someone else without paying any kind of tax. So am I right in saying those are the two main ways that one would start to fund a trust?
Yeah, Warren, there's a third way as well. But yes, that's the two main ways. If you loan money, then of course there's a loan account established. Then the growth of the asset would be in the trust. But then in terms of that Section 7C, there's a donation tax implication annually, on the interest component of that. And then between you and your spouse, there is an exemption of 100,000 Rand each. So 200,000 Rand can be donated tax-free. If you donate an amount above 200,000, there's 20% donation tax. And then another structure would be, that the trust could also be a shareholder of your business, for entrepreneurs. If the trust is a shareholder of the business, then the company pays the tax, and then dividend tax is paid. And then the dividend distribution from that business or from that company would be after tax. That would then go to the shareholder. So that's also a way how a trust could be funded, to have cash to do some investments, is through the shareholder structure of the entrepreneur's businesses.
Okay. All right. That's a nice route for entrepreneurs. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs listening to the podcast. So thanks for that. And I think the assets that go into a trust, that's an important point to talk about, because a lot of the time people put the wrong kinds of assets into a trust, and then they get caught with tax complications later on. So just, for people that are listening to me, I think the important thing there is, if you're going to put an asset into the trust, it's something that you hope will move from, let's say, you as the founder of the trust to your children, and maybe one day to your children's children. So very typically, things like, I don't know, let's just say the family holiday home that's been in the family for generations, and you want to make sure it's going to be in the family for the next few generations, or the family farm or something like that. that would be a great asset to put into a trust, because the idea is that you hopefully never have to sell that. And then the trust will look after the asset, and the next generation will get the use of it, but they're not going to have to pay lots of taxes because it's gone from one generation to the next. So I think that's a good reason. Are there other good assets or good reasons to put assets into a trust?
Yeah, Warren, that's spot on. Long term, I think that is the golden rule. And the other reason could also be, but it adds on to, whether it's generational assets. Would it go through generations? Because as you've mentioned, if the trust is the owner of the asset, you don't pay estate duty, which is 20%. You don't pay capital gains tax, because remember, when you die and you are the owner of the asset, there's a deemed disposal of the asset at the market value. So then you pay a lot of capital gains tax. And if it's within the trust, then no capital gains tax would be paid on that. And then, of course, also executors' remuneration would also be saved. So the golden rule is assets that you want to keep over a long period of time through generations. Like you mentioned, farms and and other family assets, and that needs to be transferred over to the next generation, because essentially you can lose up to 25 to 30% of that asset, if you own it when you die.
So definitely don't put your Bitcoin in there if you're planning to chop and change and trade it, because that's going to cost you a fortune. And George, is there a sort of a minimum ideal size of asset that one should consider before starting a trust? So if I've got 1,000 Rand, probably not a great idea to start a trust, because the costs of the trust will be more than that. But is there kind of an ideal benchmark for people to say, okay, I'm getting close to this amount of money, I should start to consider it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Warren. Yeah, look, you've got to look at a couple of million, I would say. But once again, you've got to look at your structure. How are you going to do it, and what is the tax implications? Because if you take 5 million and loan that to the trust, then what is the tax implications on an annual basis? And are you losing a lot of money annually by paying tax to save estate duty one day when you die? So, you've got to do the calculation and look at that. But if you get the 5 million, from dividends, over a couple of years, because the trust is a shareholder of your company, that would be a sensible structure. So once again, it depends on your personal circumstances. But if you look at, building a trust, it's got to be, you have to have the capacity and the plan, to put a couple of million in there, or worth of assets over a couple of years. It's not even worth for 1 or 2 or 3 million, that's not enough.
So we're looking at, you've mentioned that number 5 a couple of times now. Is that a good benchmark?
That's a good benchmark, yeah. 5 to 10 million, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And George, I know it's difficult to give a kind of an exact number, but is there a ballpark as to what people should expect to pay to set up a trust?
Yeah, trust cost to establish the inter vivos trust would be, I guess probably between 8 and 15,000 Rand.
Okay.
Should be a good benchmark for a proper trust deed. Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to understand as well. Shopping around for a trust is okay. I mean, shopping around for anything is a good idea. Make sure, that you get 2 or 3 quotes if you want, but just be really careful that if someone's offering you a trust for $2,000, and George has just told us that 8 to 15 is a good range, then the likelihood is that you might not be getting the best quality trust around at $2,000. It's either that the person doesn't know what they're doing, or they took the previous client's trust and they changed the names on the front, and now they're giving you basically very expensive paper that might not be ideal for what you need. So that's the honest money part of the advice in the show like this. We won't put you on the spot around that one, George. But any final comments, any final thoughts that you would want someone to know about trusts?
Yeah, I just want to touch on that topic, Warren. Yeah, with you need to do proper succession planning within the trust. Because the trust is a vehicle going through generations. So who's the replacement trustees? What happens on a beneficiary level? You need to make provision for your children, for their children. You need to make provision to form sub-trusts within the vehicle, So there's a lot of technicalities, a lot of legalese inside that document, but it's not off-the-shelf document. It's a document that you've got to apply your mind to, and you've got to adjust it and draft it, to suit the need of the family for which you are establishing that. So that's very important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, George. I think, my final word, a critical part of your planning, if you've got big assets that need to go from one generation to the next, really important to consider a trust, especially potentially a will trust, if you are a parent of young children, but then make sure you get the advice, make sure you do it properly, don't rush it. Make sure that you think about it properly, listen to the questions that the experts are asking you, because they're trying to make you think about 25, 50, 75 years time, and there are important things that need to be considered when you make these decisions. So on that basis, I think we're going to wrap it up. We're over time again. I can't seem to get this timing right. And George, thanks so much. That was really interesting. No legalese that I didn't understand. So thank you. I appreciate it. And George Robertson from Galileo Advisory Services, we hope to have you again on the show in the future.
Thank you very much, Warren. It was great to be part of it.
Thank you for listening to Honest Money. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is @WarrenIngram. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Chat soon.